You see, I can't help her because I have no money. Look, running your father's company has really been stressful, and I mean very stressful. And right now, I need all the money I can get to take myself to Miami on a vacation. You know Miami? Oh, I bet you don't. So you see why I can't help you. But you have the answer you are looking for. That thing between your legs. It was raining that night. Not the gentle kind of rain that sings softly on rooftops and lulls people to sleep. Nah. This rain came with anger. The sky roared furiously as sheets of water poured down without mercy. Thunder cracked across the heavens, shaking the darkness like the sound of 1,000 drums. Across the neighborhood, people hid inside their small homes. Some curled under blankets in their small rooms. Others, the wealthy ones, sat comfortably in their mansions, listening to the storms from behind thick glass windows. But just down Oak Street, something else was happening. Something far more tragic than the storm. If anyone had listened carefully through the noise of the rain, they would have heard the sound of desperate cries and broken pleas rising into the cold night air. Because on this very night of all nights, Baba Gbenga, the landlord, had chosen to evict them from his house, and he had no intention of showing mercy.
See, I am tired of all your useless excuses. Tired of all your useless excuses. Useless excuses. Tired of it. Is it excuses that I used to build this house? Is it excuses that I will use to feed my children?
He pointed towards the door of the small apartments with furious impatience.
If you cannot afford a roof over your head, then go and live under the bridge.
His voice thundered louder than the storm itself. Please, sir, Agnes pleaded, her voice trembling as she clasped her hand together. Pikonu, Oga landlord, even if it's not for me, pity my children. You're a father too. The rain soaked her wrapper and blouse as she knelt helplessly on the wet ground. Where will we go in this rain? Biko, help a widow. But Baba Gbenga's face hardened even more.
Will you shut that mouth and stop the emotional blackmail? Are you the only widow on earth? Did I kill your husband? What is my business?
He waved his hand dismissively, already losing patience.
I beg, carry your children and get out of my compound.
Agnes collapsed onto the wet floor, her cry tearing through the storm like a wounded animal. Ah, death! Death! How could you be so wicked? Her voice shook with unbearable pain. You took my husband away from me, and now they have taken everything away from us. What will I do now? Hey! Her children quickly circled around her, frightened and confused, trying to hold their mother as the rain continued to fall heavily around them. But Baba Gbenga showed no pity. One by one, he threw out the last remaining items from the tiny apartment. A broken chair, a worn mattress, traveling bags. Each item landed on the muddy ground with a dull thud. Pack your useless kaya and find somewhere else to stay. I did not come to this city to train fowls, he shouted impatiently. He dusted his hands as if he had just finished throwing away trash. And listen well, he added with a warning glare. if I return here by morning and I still find you and your useless children here, anything you see, take it." He leaned closer, his voice dripping with menace. "Don't say I didn't warn you. Olori buruku omo oshi," he muttered under his breath with disgust. "Who knows if it is your wickedness that killed your husband? Stupid woman." Then he slammed the door shut, fixed a brand new padlock on it, and stormed out of the compound without looking back. Behind her mother, Nmasi stood silently with tears burning in her eyes. She was the eldest of Agnes' children, only 15 years old. Yet, in that moment, the weight of the whole world seemed to rest on her young shoulders. Who would have believed that life could turn against them so cruelly? Just 2 years earlier, their life had been completely different. Back then, they lived in one of the biggest estates in Lagos, a grand house that everyone in the neighborhood admired. It was her father's mansion. The compound was large, the rooms were beautiful, and laughter had filled the house almost every day. Life had been smooth. Everything had been going well, until the day everything changed. Her father had an accident, and he never returned home alive. The moment he died, the sweetness of life disappeared like smoke carried away by the wind. Everything turned sour. Her father's own brothers, the men who used to sit in their living rooms laughing and eating, suddenly showed their true colors. They became wolves. Without shame, they drove Agnes and her children out of the house and took over everything that belonged to their late brother. Oh, don't even think Agnes was a weak woman because she fought. Oh, Agnes fought with everything she had. But the uncles were diabolical men. They were willing to go any lengths to silence her, even if it meant killing her. When threats did not break her spirit, they ganged up against her with wicked accusations. They even spread the terrible rumor that she had killed her own husband. And that's made the village council of elders invite her and force her to swear by a shrine. The pain of those words nearly destroyed her. In the end, Agnes had no choice. She had to stay alive for her children. So, she was thrown out with her children, and they left the mansion with nothing, just a small bag, not even the clothes that truly belonged to them. And that was how they found themselves in this small, forgotten town, far away from the life they once knew. Agnes struggled to survive in the new town. Every morning, before the sun rose, she went to the small markets to sell foodstuff, rice, beans, garri, and whatever little she could afford to buy and resell. But the money was never enough. It was barely enough to feed the children. Paying rent felt like an impossible dream. Now, even that small roof over their heads had been taken away. As the cold rain continued to fall on Nmasi, she barely felt it. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face. But the storm inside her heart burned far hotter than the rain outside. It broke her heart to watch her mother cry helplessly on the ground, to watch her younger siblings shiver and cling to their mother in fear. The suffering was too much for a 15-year-old girl to carry. Unable to bear the sight any longer, Nmasi suddenly turned and ran. She ran without direction, without thinking. without knowing where her feet were taking her. Ma, where are you going? Come back here, her mother shouted desperately behind her. But Nmasi could not stop. The tears in her eyes blurred her vision as she ran down the lonely road. She ran until her legs grew weak and her breath came out in painful gasp. Finally, she reached a lonely tree standing beside the road. There, she collapsed onto the wet ground and cried her heart out. The suffering was simply too much. She cried and cried until her chest began to ache. The tears refused to stop. Every thought in her mind circled around the same painful truth. Her mother was suffering. Her younger siblings were suffering. And she could no longer stand there and do nothing. Slowly, as the rain softened into a quiet drizzle, a decision formed in her heart. A heavy and painful one. But to her, it felt like the only choice left. She would not continue to watch her mother suffer like this. She had to step in. She had to do something. Now, besties, Nmasi was in her final year in secondary school. Just one more year and she would graduate. But that night, under that lonely tree, she made up her mind. She would drop out of school, find a job, any job, and she would help her mother take care of the family. The rain finally stopped, but sleep refused to come easily. The ground beneath the tree was damp and cold. Mosquitoes buzzed angrily around her ears, biting her arms and legs without mercy. Yet, even their bites could not distract her from the storm raging inside her heart. Her mind kept replaying the image of her mother kneeling in the rain, begging, crying, helpless. It was not until almost daybreak that exhaustion finally defeated her, and she drifted into a troubled sleep. She did not even realize when the morning light slowly crept across the sky. Soon, the road beside the tree became busy. People began stepping out of their houses, traders heading towards the market, workers rushing to begin their daily hustle. A few of them slowed down when they noticed the young girl sleeping under the tree. They stared at her with curiosity and suspicion. "Did she sleep here?" one woman whispered to another as they passed. Another man shook his head. "Young girls of nowadays," he muttered. "She must have done something bad and run away from home. Now, wow." Some laughed softly, others simply walked away. But only one person showed kindness. An old man with a walking stick stopped beside the tree and bent down slowly. "Hey, young girl, wake up," he shouted gently, nudging her arm with a stick. Nmasi opened her eyes suddenly and jumped up immediately, startled and confused. Her eyes darted around her surroundings as if trying to understand how she had ended up there. It took a few seconds before reality began to settle in. Then she heard the old man's voice again. "What are you doing here?" That was when her memory came rushing back. Everything. The rain, the eviction, her mother's cries, the helplessness. Tears filled her eyes once more as she looked down at her damp clothes. Her mother. She must be looking for her by now. The old man studied her carefully. The sadness in her eyes softened his expression. "Tell me," he said gently, his voice calmer now. "Why are you crying? Did you do anything wrong at home?" Nmasi did not answer immediately. For a long moment, she simply stood there, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Then, finally, she looked up at him. "Can you come with me, sir?" she asked quietly. The shakiness in her voice immediately told the old man that something was terribly wrong. Pabolu had lived long enough to recognize pain when he saw it. So without asking any more questions, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Let us go." The walk back to the compound was silent, but the moment they arrived, Pabolu immediately understood everything. The door of the small apartment was locked with a new padlock. The family's few belongings were scattered across the muddy ground. The mattress was soaked with rain. Broken pots and old bags lay carelessly in the dirt. And sitting among those belongings was Agnes, her face swollen from crying. Her younger children clung tightly to her as if afraid she might disappear if they let go. The moment Agnes saw Nmasi approaching, she rushed forward. "Ma," she cried, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Where did you go? I thought something terrible had happened to you." Nmasi held her mother tightly as tears rolled down her cheeks again. Pabolu stood quietly beside them, taking in the painful scene. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "My daughter," he said gently to Agnes. "What happened here?" Agnes slowly explained everything. When she finished speaking, Pabolu sighed deeply. He shook his head sadly. This life, so unpredictable. He stood quietly for a moment, thinking. Then finally he spoke again. "Listen," he said slowly. "I have a small house in my compound." He scratched his head awkwardly. "It's not a fine place, so." He lifted his finger as if warning them in advance. "The roof leaks when rain falls, and the walls are old." He looked at them kindly. "But it is better than not having a roof over your head." For a moment, Agnes and Nmasi simply stared at him in disbelief. Then suddenly, both mother and daughter dropped to their knees. "Thank you, sir. Thank you," Agnes cried. "God will bless you." "Thank you, sir," Nmasi added quickly, her voice shaking with gratitude. And that was how they found themselves living in Pabolu's small leaking house. Life did not suddenly become easier after they moved into Pabolu's house. Far from it. Whenever it rained, the family still stayed awake through the night, rushing around the tiny room, moving their few belongings from one corner to another to escape the dripping water that fell mercilessly from the leaking roof. Sometimes, they would squeeze themselves into one small dry corner of the room, clinging tightly to each other just to avoid being completely drenched. The cold nights were long and uncomfortable, but at least they were finally free from Baba Gbenga, the wicked landlord, who had made their lives miserable. Every Eke market day, he would deliberately pass by Agnes's small shop just to humiliate her. Sometimes, he would stand there loudly demanding a rent he knew so well that she could not afford, and he was always increasing the rent. Other times, he would openly insult her in front of customers, calling her lazy and useless. Each visit felt like a knife twisting inside Agnes's heart. But now, slowly, life began to take a different turn. Pabolu, who had watched their suffering quietly, decided to help in another way. Since Nmasi no longer went to school, he introduced her to his master, a wealthy man who owned one of the biggest farms in the town. The work was hard, very hard, but it was still work. When Nmasi told her mother she wanted to drop out of school so she could take the job, Agnes cried bitterly. Her heart shattered at the thought of her daughter abandoning her education. But deep down, she knew the truth. They had no choice. Nmasi had to pay her WAEC fee, and she couldn't afford it right now. All she could do was pray. Every day she knelt down, lifting her hands to the heavens, begging God to send help their way. And little by little, the small money Nmasi earned from the farm began to support the family too. It was not much, but when added to the little money her mother made from the market, it made a difference. At least, now, her younger siblings who had been sitting helplessly at home were able to enroll in the nearby government school. Nmasi worked tirelessly, from sunrise to sunset, planting, weeding, harvesting, carrying heavy baskets across the farm. By the time she returned home each evening, exhaustion clung to her body like a heavy blanket. Most days, she would simply drop her bag, spread herself on a thin mat in the corner of the room, and fall flat on her back, too tired to even speak. Agnes would watch her quietly. Tears would often gather in her eyes. The selflessness this girl carried in her heart touched her so deeply. So many girls her age were still carefree, worrying about school gossip and clothes. But her daughter had taken the burden of a whole family upon her shoulders. Every night, Agnes would sit beside her, hold her tired hands gently and whisper a prayer. "God will bless you, my child," she would say softly, and those words became a ritual between them. Slowly, things began to change. Nmasi started saving small portions of the money she earned, little by little, coin by coin, until one day, she had enough to start a small fish business with her mother. The old shop where Agnes had once struggled to sell foodstuffs was finally closed down. It had brought them nothing but frustration. Now, they tried something new. Agnes would wake up early in the morning to roast the fish carefully over charcoal, the rich smoky aroma filling the air around their compound. Then, Nmasi would carry the tray on her head and hawk the fish around the busy market. "Fresh roasted fish," she would call out loudly as she moved through the crowd. At first, business was slow, but gradually customers began to recognize her. They loved the taste of Agnes's roasted fresh fish. Soon, people started looking forward to seeing Nmasi walk through the markets with her tray. For the first time in a long while, life began to feel a little lighter. Things slowly started getting better for them. At least now, they could eat 2 proper meals a day, sometimes even 3 on a good day. Years passed. Nmasi was 17 by now, and Agnes had begun to dream again. She planned for her daughter to return to school, to at least sit for her WAEC examinations. But just when hope had begun to bloom in their lives, tragedy struck. One evening, Nmasi returned home from the market earlier than usual. The tray she carried on her head was lighter than normal. Business had not been very good that day, but she was eager to get home. Something inside her felt uneasy. As she pushed open the weak wooden door of their small room, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. The room was unusually quiet, too quiet. Her younger siblings sat huddled together in a corner, whispering nervously. And on the thin mat in the middle of the room lay Agnes. She was sweating heavily. Her body trembled as if an invincible force was shaking her from within. "Mama," Nmasi called softly. There was no response. She rushed forward immediately and knelt beside her mother. "Mama." Agnes slowly opened her eyes. Her breathing was shallow. Fine," she whispered weakly. But Nmasi knew that was not true. Her mother's body felt unusually hot. Panic gripped her heart. Without wasting another second, she jumped to her feet. "I'll be back," she told her siblings quickly. Then she ran. She ran straight to the nearest chemist shop in the town. Her heart pounded violently as she explained her mother's symptoms to the man behind the counter. The chemist quickly wrapped some tablets in a small paper and handed them to her. "This should help," he said. Nmasi grabbed the medicine and rushed back home. She helped her mother take the drugs and prayed they would work. For a moment, it seemed like they did. But as the days passed, the sickness only grew worse. Agnes became weaker, her body grew thinner, her voice faded. Some days, she could barely sit up. Fear slowly began to crawl into Nmasi's heart. This was no ordinary illness. It was something far beyond what she could handle on her own. Finally, after another terrible night, where her mother cried out in pain, Nmasi made a decision. She would take her to the hospital, even if it meant spending every kobo they had. At the hospitals, the doctors ran tests. The waiting felt endless. Every second stretched painfully as Nmasi sat outside the consultation room, her hands trembling. Finally, the doctor called her in. His face was serious. "Your mother is suffering from a strange ailment," he explained. "If it is not properly treated, it could lead to death." The words struck Nmasi like lightning. Another death? Her ears rang, her head spun. Then the doctor placed the hospital bill on the table. Nmasi stared at the paper. The amount written there looked impossible. Her heart sank immediately. She did not have that kind of money, not even clothes. She left the hospital with her mother and returned home with heavy steps. Babolu tried to help. The old man brought out the little money he had saved and placed it in Nmasi's hand. "My daughter, this is all I have," he said apologetically. But even with that, the money was still far from enough. Nmasi sat beside her mother that night, her mind racing. Her heart was breaking. She could not watch her mother die. Agnes was their only parent, their protector, their only hope. There was only one place left that she could go. The place she had avoided for years. Her uncle's house. Swallowing the bitter taste of shame, Nmasi made up her mind. She would go and beg him for help. She would endure whatever humiliation came with it, because losing her mother was something she simply could not bear. The next morning, after dropping off her mother in the hospital, she went to see him, hoping that he would help her raise some money. But what her uncle told her shocked her to her very soul. "Nmasi, you have grown into a very beautiful girl," he said slowly, his eyes scanning her body in a way that made her skin crawl. So, you say your mother is sick and you expect me to help her? He chuckled dryly. You see, I can't help her because I have no money. He leaned back comfortably in his chair. Look, running your father's company has really been stressful, and I mean very stressful. And right now, I need all the money I can get to take myself to Miami on a vacation. He smirked. You know Miami? He paused as if expecting her to respond. When she said nothing, he continued, Oh, I bet you don't. He shrugged carelessly. So you see why I can't help you. Then, his voice dropped into something darker. But you have the answer you are looking for. He pointed lazily at her, that thing between your legs. Then he burst into a wicked laughter. Look at you. You're exactly the way men like it, young and fresh. Go to a clubhouse. I could even give you some money to buy a pretty dress. Find yourself a man and peel him. Your mother would be fine. He lifted his wine glass calmly. As for me, I'm having a mental meltdown and I need all the rest I can get. Nmasi stood there frozen. Tears rolled slowly down her cheeks. This same man. The man who was now advising her to go into prostitution had sent his own children abroad with her father's money. He was living comfortably in her father's mansion, enjoying the life that once belonged to her family. Before she realized it, the words had already escaped her lips. You are wicked, uncle. No, you are evil. God will punish you. 1,000 times over, he will punish you. Uncle Dike remained relaxed in his chair. He looked completely unbothered as he slowly sipped his wine. Perhaps so many people had cursed him in his lifetime that he had grown used to it. He glanced at her lazily. Look at you. No home training. Very useless thing, just like your mother. Get out and go and die with her. You want me to help you and no fear. When you are done backing, just use the door. He hissed loudly. It was in that moment that Nmasi finally understood the full depth of her uncle's wickedness. Furiously, she stormed out of the house. Her chest burned with anger and humiliation. As she stepped outside, she kicked the door violently behind her. Tears blurred her vision as she walked away. She returned to the hospital with heavy steps. Each step felt like a burden pressing down on her chest. When she entered the ward and looked at her mother lying weakly on the hospital bed, tears immediately filled her eyes again. Agnes looked smaller than she had ever looked before. Her once lively face had grown pale and tired. Even her breathing sounded strained. What hurt Nmasi the most was not just the sickness. It was the cold attitude of the nurses. They had barely attended to her mother since they arrived. Instead, they kept whispering amongst themselves about how the hospital was already full. Some of them had even begun complaining loudly. There are patients outside who can actually pay, and we have limited bed space here. If they cannot pay the deposit soon, they will have to leave. The words pierced Nmasi's heart like sharp knives. Leave? Where would they go? She could not bear the humiliation any longer. Slowly, she walked outside the hospital building and sat on a long bench near the entrance. The afternoon sun burned overhead, but she barely noticed it. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks as she lifted her eyes towards the sky. Her heart cried out silently. What she needed now was nothing short of a miracle. Minutes passed, then hours. People walked in and out of the hospital gates. Cars drove past. Voices echoed around her. But Nmasi remained there, lost in her sorrow. She had been sitting there for a very long time when suddenly a hand gently tapped her shoulder. Nmasi jumped up immediately in fear. "Hey!" Then the voice came. It was very soft. "You are crying. What's wrong, baby girl?" Nmasi turned. Standing beside her was a woman who looked to be in her early 50s. She was elegant, very elegant. Her hair was neatly styled and her clothes were simple but expensive looking. There was something refined about her appearance, something that made her stand out immediately. But what struck Nmasi the most was a genuine concern written across the woman's face. It was that kindness that finally broke the wall Nmasi had been holding up. The tears burst out of her again. Before she realized it, she began pouring out her entire story. Her father's death, her wicked uncles, the eviction, the years of suffering, her mother's sickness, and the impossible hospital bill. She spoke like someone who had been carrying a heavy load for too long and had finally found a place to drop it. The woman listened quietly. She did not interrupt her, neither did she rush her. She simply watched her with deep sympathy. When Nmasi finally finished speaking, the woman sighed softly. "Oh, this is such a terrible situation for anyone to be in," she said gently. "I am really so sorry." She opened her handbag slowly and brought out a fresh white handkerchief. "Here," she said, handing it to Nmasi. "Dry your tears." Nmasi took it gently and wiped her face. The woman smiled kindly at her. "Look, this is not the end of life for you. You will definitely come out of this. You're such a beautiful girl, and I would love to help you." Then she reached into her bag again and brought out a small card. She placed it in Nmasi's trembling hand. "I need you to go home and freshen up. Then meet me at this location by 6 p.m. so we can talk properly." For a moment, Nmasi simply stared at the card. Her heart suddenly leaped with excitement. Hope, real hope. "Thank you. Thank you so much, ma. Thank you. God will bless you. Thank you," she said quickly, her voice filled with gratitude. She wiped her tears hurriedly and rushed back inside the hospital. Mama, I met an angel who wants to help us. I promise you, you will be fine," she said, her voice trembling with joy. And with that, she rushed back home. The address on the card led Nmasi to a part of town she had never visited before. By the time she arrived, the evening sky had already begun to darken. The street lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the quiet road. She stood in front of the building and stared at it. Music poured out from inside, loud music, the kind that made the walls tremble. Men walked in and out of the place laughing loudly, some already drunk, others holding cigarettes between their fingers. Nmasi's stomach tightened. Something about the place made her uneasy, but she remembered her mother lying helplessly in the hospital. She remembered the doctor's warning and slowly she pushed the door open. The smell of alcohol and perfume hit her immediately. Colored lights flashed across the room. Women in revealing dresses moved around the tables, laughing with men, touching their arms, whispering in their ears. Nmasi froze. Her heart began to beat fast. This was not what she expected. She turned to leave. Ah, you came. The voice stopped her. She turned. The elegant woman from the hospital was walking towards her, smiling warmly. Up close, she looked even more beautiful, confident, powerful. Nmasi, right? She said gently. Yes, ma, Nmasi replied nervously. The woman stretched out her hand. My name is Madame Becky. She gestured around the place. Welcome. Nmasi's eyes moved slowly around the room again. Confusion filled her face. This place, she whispered. Yes, this is my place. Madame Becky laughed softly. She led Nmasi to a quiet corner and motioned for her to sit. You see, my dear, life sometimes puts us in situations where we must make difficult choices. Nmasi's heart was already sensing where the conversation was heading. Madame Becky leaned closer. You are a very beautiful girl. In fact, you are what we call hot cake. Nmasi frowned slightly. I don't understand. Madame Becky smiled. With a face like yours, men will spend money without even thinking. She gestured towards the women moving around the club. You see those girls? They dance, they entertain men, and they make more money in one night than most people make in 1 month. Nmasi's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. Madame Becky continued speaking smoothly. You told me your mother is dying. You said the hospital needs money immediately. With this job, you can make enough money to take care of your mother. You can feed your siblings. You can even return to school later. Her words sounded sweet, too sweet. But something inside Nmasi twisted violently. This is not what I thought, she whispered, shaking her head slowly. Madame Becky's voice softened. Listen to me carefully, Nmasi. This world is not fair. Sometimes we must use what we have to survive. And what you have is beauty. Nmasi's chest tightened. Her stomach churned. Suddenly she stood up. I can't do this. She turned and rushed towards the door. The loud music pounded in her ears as she ran outside. The night air hit her face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside her. She bent over, breathing heavily. Her heart raced wildly. Then the voices began. Her uncle's cruel voice echoed in her mind. You have the answer, that thing between your legs. Then Madame Becky's voice followed. You are beautiful. Men will pay to have you. Then the doctor's voice. If this illness is not treated, it could lead to death. Nmasi grabbed her head tightly. No! 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 The voices grew louder. Her breathing became frantic. She covered her ears with both hands and screamed loudly on the road. Passerbys turned to stare, but she did not care. Her world was collapsing around her. Her head was spinning, and she was losing touch with reality. Before she knew it, she began to hear loud screams around her. As she turned, people were screaming loudly. But it was too late, because a car was coming with its full speed towards her, and the last thing she heard were the screeching of tires. The car swerved in another direction and hit a pole. Passers-by scattered. Some gathered around the poor girl who seemed to be unconscious, wondering if she was dead, while others rushed to the accident scene. For what seemed like a long time, everywhere was silent as they stared at the girl, wondering the next step to take. Then, suddenly, Nmasi jumped on her feet, touching herself as if to be sure she was still alive. Oh, she was still very much alive. Without saying a word, she took to her heels and ran home as fast as she could, as people stood, staring in shock and wondering if she was mentally okay. That night, sleep did not come. How could it? Nmasi lay awake on the mat staring into the darkness. Her mind refused to rest. In the other corner of the room, her younger siblings had gone to bed with tears in their eyes. There had been nothing to eat. Their stomachs had remained empty. All the money they had saved had gone into the hospital, and still, it wasn't even enough. And to even make matters worse, the doctor had given her 48 hours. 48 hours to make a significant deposit or get her mother out of the hospital. The number echoed endlessly in her mind. Nmasi's eyes filled with tears. Was their lives cursed? Or had they done something wrong in their previous lives to deserve all the terrible things happening to them? This was just too much for one person to bear. She couldn't bear to lose another parent again. No, not after her father. Finally, she made up her mind. Nothing, absolutely nothing was too much to give up for her own family. The next evening, as the sun slowly sank behind the dusty roofs of the town, Nmasi stood once again in front of the same building. The same loud music drifted through the doors, the same laughter, the same flashing lights. But this time, she did not hesitate as long. Her heart still trembled, but her mind had already made its decision. She pushed the door open. The heavy smell of alcohol and perfume wrapped around her again. Some of the men at the table glanced up briefly before returning to their drinks. The women moved confidently across the room as though this world belonged to them. Madame Becky spotted her almost immediately. A slow smile spread across her face. "I knew you would come back," she said calmly as she walked towards her. Nmasi lowered her eyes. "I didn't come back because I wanted to," she said quietly. Madame Becky studied her face for a moment. "No one ever does at first. But we can't choose our problems." Then she motioned towards a chair. "Sit down." Nmasi obeyed silently. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Madame Becky leaned forward. "Tell me something," she said. "Is your mother still alive?" Nmasi's chest tightened. "She is, but the doctor says she needs treatment immediately." Madame Becky nodded slowly. "And you need money?" "Yes," Nmasi swallowed hard. Madame Becky folded her hands together. "I know this place is not heaven, but it fits people. Most of the girls you see here came with stories just like yours. It is not like you're killing anybody or committing a crime. What's the point of your mother birthing a beautiful girl if she can't use her body to save her when in distress? Listen, You'll be happy you made this choice." Then she leaned closer. "You are different, Nmasi. You are beautiful. Men will notice you immediately. You will make money very fast. But once you start, you must understand something. This life is not easy to live." The words hung in the air, but Nmasi already knew that. She had thought about it the entire night. She closed her eyes briefly, then she opened them again. "My mother must not die," she said softly. Madam Becky watched her carefully. Then she stood up. "Come with me." She led Nmasi through a narrow hallway behind the main bar. At the end of the hallway was a dressing room filled with mirrors and bright lights. Several women sat around applying makeup and fixing their hair. Some of them looked up curiously when Nmasi entered. "This is Nmasi," Madam Becky announced. "She is new." A few of the women nodded politely. One of them smiled gently. "First day is always the hardest," she said quietly. Madam Becky opened a wardrobe and pulled out a dress. It was short, shiny, nothing like the clothes Nmasi had ever worn before. She placed it in Nmasi's hand. "Tonight, you start learning and working at the same time. You need to make money quickly to save your mother. I have a special client already waiting for you. Just do as he says, and you get lots of money in return." Nmasi stared at the dress. Her hands trembled slightly, but she took it. That night was the longest night of her life. Everything felt unreal. Men watched her with eyes that made her skin crawl as she stepped out. Every smile she forced felt heavy. Every step felt like walking through fire. Inside, something deep within her cried endlessly. But she kept moving. Because every moment she remembered the hospital, her mother's weak voice, the doctor's warning. And so, she endured. True to Madam Becky's words, a man was waiting for her on the table. He was mature and should be in his 50s. Handsome was never a word close to his description. In fact, ugly suited him better. But he looked very wealthy and smelled expensive too. "Meet Alhaji Umar," Madam Becky introduced them with a bright smile. "Alhaji, meet my new girl, Umar. This one is premium and fresh." She nudged him playfully. Alhaji burst into loud laughter, his large body shaking. "Ah, Becky, you know my taste well," he said, his eyes roaming over Nmasi. "Young, beautiful, just the way I like it." "Ah!" Nmasi stood there quietly. Tears gathered in Nmasi's eyes, but she dared not let it fall. Not after all the lectures and warnings Madam Becky had given her. She had made her understand that Chief was one of her highest paying customers, and she had to behave if she was getting any money. Her first night with the Chief was the worst night of her life. Immediately they got to the hotel room, he pounced on her like an animal. It was her first time, but he didn't even care. He seemed to be having a good time as her cries filled the room. Immediately he finished with her, he fell on the other side of the bed, and before Nmasi knew it, he was already snoring loudly. But Nmasi slipped quietly into the bathroom. She turned on the tap and then she broke into tears. The tears came uncontrollably. She cried like a child who had lost something she could never get back. She cried until her chest hurt, until her body felt empty. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry, but this was what I had to do." But even in that pain, she reminded herself why she was there. Her mothers, her siblings, their survival. And that was the night Nmasi stopped being just a girl and became a sacrifice. Night after night she returned. The first few nights at the club passed like a strange dream. Everything still felt unreal to Nmasi. The music was always loud. The lights were always flashing. Men laughed loudly as if nothing in the world could ever trouble them. But the quiet storm inside Nmasi never stopped. She moved through the room the way Madam Becky had instructed her. Smile, walk slowly, look confident, pretend you belong here. But every step felt heavy. And it wasn't difficult to get customers. In fact, she was indeed a hot cake, beautiful and innocent. Slowly, the money began to come. The first thing she did was rush to the hospital. The doctors began treatment immediately. The medicines were expensive, very expensive. But Nmasi paid for them, every bill, every injection, every test. Her siblings back home now had enough food to eat. And weeks later, her mother began to recover. For the first time in months, Agnes was able to sit up without help. The day the doctor said she would survive, Nmasi cried harder than she had ever cried before. She had saved her mother. But something else had changed. The hospital bills did not stop. Her mother now depended on expensive drugs to stay healthy. And the truth slowly became clear. The small jobs she once dreamed of doing could never sustain those costs. The only place where the money came quickly was the place she had sworn she would never belong. So she continued, night after night, sacrificing pieces of herself quietly so that her family could live. Within a year, she was able to move her family out of Pabulu's leaking house. They moved into a better environment, a small but comfortable apartment. Her younger siblings returned to school properly. Food was no longer scarce in the house. To them, Nmasi had become a miracle. But when she was alone, when the music stopped, when the lights went off, the tears always came. She would sit quietly in the darkness and cry, because deep inside her heart, she knew the truth. This was not the life she had chosen. Situations had forced her into it. And every day, she held on to one fragile hope. That one day, maybe when she had saved enough money, she would finally leave that life behind and start again. Start a more responsible life again. Years passed. Slowly, painfully, Nmasi fought her way out of that life. It was not easy. Madam Becky refused to let her go. Too many men asked for her. Too much money came because of her face. Too many people had already marked her as one of the girls who should never escape. But Nmasi had grown tired. Tired of the music, tired of the fake laughter, tired of the men who touched her body but never saw her pain. Tired of washing shame off herself every night and still waking up feeling unclean. So she fought for her freedom. With the money she had managed to save in secret, she left the club and started a small business of her own. At first, she was afraid. Afraid that Madame Becky would drag her back. Afraid that someone from that old life would recognize her. Afraid that no matter how hard she tried, her past would keep following her like a shadow at noon. But life slowly began to settle. Her mother grew stronger by the day. Her siblings were doing well in school. The house was now quieter, more respectable, normal. And for the first time in many years, Nmasi began to breathe like a human being again. Yet, some wounds do not disappear simply because life becomes softer. Though she now dressed decently and carried herself with dignity, there were nights she still sat alone in her room, remembering everything she had done to keep her family alive. Some memories still made her cry. Some still made her kneel beside her bed and ask God for mercy. By the time she turned 25, Nmasi had become a woman people admired quietly. She was beautiful, yes, but there was also something else about her, a sadness she hid well, a softness that came from pain, a strength that had been born from survival. And then, one night, something happened. The music in the bar was loud, but not loud enough to drown the memories that filled Akin's mind that night. He leaned back in his chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the swirling light that danced across the ceiling. Across from him sat his old secondary school friend, Emeka. It had been 15 years since they had last seen each other. 15 long years. Aki had left Nigeria immediately after their secondary school graduation to pursue further studies in London. Life abroad had been good to him. He had built a thriving business, made money, and matured in ways he never imagined. But despite all his achievements, something had always been missing. Home. And the friends he had left behind. Now, he was back in Nigeria for the first time in a decade. And the reunion with Emeka felt almost surreal. Guy, you don't finally become big man, oh, Emeka laughed, raising his glass. Aki smiled. And you two never change. Still the same Emeka. They both burst into laughter. They spent the next hour reminiscing about their secondary school days, the punishments, the football matches, the mischief, the teachers they used to fear. It felt like time had rolled back. But fate had something else planned for that night. Just as Akin lifted his glass again, the bar door opened. 3 ladies walked in. The lights from the floor reflected on them as they moved gracefully towards an empty table, directly in front of Akin and Emeka. And then Akin saw her, Nmasi. She looked like a painting that had come to life. Her dark skin glowed under the dim lights of the club. Her long hair flowed softly down her shoulders, and her eyes carried a mysterious depth that made it impossible to look away. She was in her mid-20s, yet she carried herself with an elegance that commanded attention. Akin stopped mid-sentence. His eyes followed her until she sat down with her friends. Emeka noticed. A slow smile crept across his face. "Guy, your eyes don't hook," he teased. Akin laughed nervously, but he did not deny it. For several minutes, he kept stealing glances at her. Something about her presence and innocence stirred something deep inside him. Finally, after gathering courage, Akin stood up. "Wish me luck," he said to Emeka. Emeka smirked. "You need no luck, just go." Akin walked straight to the girls. The closer he got, the more his heart beat faster. "Good evening, ladies," he said politely. They turned. Nmasi's eyes met his. And for a moment, time stood still. The man standing before her was clean, tall and extremely handsome. There was something warm in his face, something calm in the way he stood, something gentle in his eyes that made him look different from the noisy men who usually filled places like that. And he was looking directly at her. For one small moment, everywhere became quiet. The music in the background faded, the laughter around them disappeared. Even Nmasi's friends seemed far away. It was just the two of them staring at each other like strangers who somehow looked familiar. Then he found his voice. "My friend and I are celebrating our union tonight. Would you mind joining us?" The girls exchanged glances immediately. One of them leaned close to Nmasi and whispered quickly, her eyes dancing with excitement. But before Nmasi could even begin to object, the girl grabbed her hand. "Who says no to a handsome gentleman?" "Why not?" she said with a grin. Nmasi gave her a look, half warning, half embarrassment. But it was already too late. Her friend was smiling. The handsome stranger was smiling. Even his friend at the table was smiling as though he already knew the night had changed direction. And somehow, despite herself, Nmasi smiled too. That single decision changed everything. They moved over to Akin and Emeka's table. Introductions followed. Laughter came easily. Drinks flowed. Stories were exchanged. And before the night ended, something beautiful had begun between Akin and Nmasi. At first, it was the small things. The way Akin listened whenever she spoke. The way he leaned in slightly when she talked, as though he did not want to miss even a single sentence. The way his eyes softened each time she smiled. And Nmasi noticed things too. She noticed he did not interrupt her. He did not try to show off. He did not speak over her just to prove he was a man. No. He asked questions, listened, and laughed with his full chest. And when one of her friends made a joke about Nmasi being too quiet, Akin smiled gently and said, "Quiet people are often the ones with the deepest minds." Nmasi looked up at him then, and something warm brushed against her heart. When it was time to leave that night, Akin did not want the moment to end. Neither did she. But both of them were too careful to say it. So he walked her and her friends outside instead. The night air was cool, the city lights glowed softly around them. Cars passed, music drifted from nearby buildings, and yet everything somehow felt softer than before. As Nmasi stood by the car, Akin cleared his throat. "I had a really good time tonight," he said. Nmasi lowered her eyes shyly and smiled. "I did too." There was a small pause. Then he asked carefully, "Would it be okay if I saw you again?" One of her friends, who had clearly decided she was now part of the relationship committee, coughed dramatically, and turned away with a wicked smile. Nmasi tried not to laugh. She looked back at Aki. Yes, it would be okay. The smile that spread across his face was so boyish, so real, that it made her laugh again. That night, after dropping her off, Nmasi lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. She told herself to sleep. She told herself it was just an ordinary meeting. She told herself not to think too much. But each time she closed her eyes, she saw his face again. That smile, those gentle eyes, the softness in his voice when he spoke to her. Meanwhile, in his own room, Aki was no better. Emeka, who was crashing with him that night, had barely removed his shirt before he turned and caught him smiling to himself. "What is it, Aki?" Emeka asked, narrowing his eyes playfully. "Why are you smiling like a man that has found a hidden treasure?" Akin shook his head, but the smile remained. "She is different, Emeka." Emeka laughed. So it has happened. Akin has fallen, just like that. Akin did not argue, because somewhere deep inside him, he knew it was true. From that night onward, Aki and Nmasi became inseparable. What started as a casual meeting quickly blossomed into something deeper. At first, it was breakfast dates that stretched too long because neither of them wanted to leave. Then evening walks, where they talked about everything and nothing. Then phone calls that began with, "I just wanted to hear your voice," and somehow lasted for hours. Aki admired everything about her. Her intelligence, her calmness, her humility. But even beyond that, he loved the little things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she laughed and tried to cover her mouth after. The way she always remembered small things he said, even the things he had forgotten saying himself. And Nmasi found comfort in Akin's kindness and sincerity. Unlike many men she had known in the past, Akin treated her with genuine respect, and the love he showed her was second to none. He was always checking up on her, caring for her. He noticed when she was tired, even when she insisted she was fine. He would look at her sometimes with so much softness that she would have to look away because it felt too intimate, too sweet, too dangerous for a heart that had learned to be careful. One evening, Akin sent Nmasi a simple message: "Be ready by 6. Don't ask questions." She frowned slightly at the message. "Where are we going? Just trust me." At exactly 6 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her house. The driver stepped out and opened the door respectfully. "Sir asked me to bring you." Nmasi blinked in surprise. "Sir?" But before she could ask another question, the car was already moving. 30 minutes later, they stopped at the waterfront. The evening breeze rolled gently over the sea. Soft lights glowed along the shore, and waves whispered quietly against the sand. And there stood Aki, hands in his pockets, smiling like a man who had been waiting all day for that moment. Nmasi stepped out slowly, looking around. "Aki, what is this?" "Dinner," he said simply. She looked again. A small table had been arranged right there on the sand, white clothes, soft lantern light, fresh flowers dancing in the wind. Her eyes widened. "You did all this for me?" Aki shrugged lightly. "I thought you deserved something beautiful tonight." They sat down. The ocean breeze wrapped around them like a quiet blessing. Soft music played from somewhere nearby. Nmasi laughed when the wind kept blowing her hair across her face. Akin reached across the table gently. "Hold still," he said softly. He tucked the hair behind her ear. Then he looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. "What?" she asked shyly. "You are very beautiful." Her cheeks warmed. "Akin, I meant it," he said. "And I love you so much." She tried to hide her smile by looking at the sea, but he had already seen it, and that smile made the entire night worth it. And that didn't even stop. Akin was so intentional about her, and he filled her life with so much surprises. All Nmasi had known all her life had been how to take care of people. She hardly thought about herself, but Akin always made her remember. And slowly, without realizing it, Nmasi began waiting for his messages, his voice, the next unexpected moment he would place into her life. One evening, after returning from a quiet boat ride, they sat together watching the sunset melt across the water. Nmasi leaned her head gently on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Akin said quietly, "Nmasi, have you noticed something? My day is never complete until I hear your voice." Nmasi smiled softly in the fading light. "Akin, no, I am serious," he said gently. "You have become part of my day so naturally that I don't even know when it happened." Her heart beat faster. For a few seconds she said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say, but because her heart was too full. Then finally she whispered softly, "You make me happy too." There was a quiet exhale from him, the kind a man gives when the words he has been hoping for finally come. And from that moment on, their love deepened in quiet, beautiful ways. Finally, Nmasi found a man that doesn't see her like an object, a man that truly loves her for who she was. And the only thing he desires is to see her smile. 3 months later, under the soft light of a quiet restaurant by the waterfront, Akin went down on one knee. "Nmasi, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes, yes," she screamed as she threw herself into his arms. My dearest besties, this should have been the beginning of a perfect life. But secrets have a way of poisoning even the sweetest love stories. Because 8 years ago, we all knew that the story had been completely different. And for 4 years, she succeeded without any problems. Until that night. That night that she walked into that bar and met Akin. Because there was also someone else there who knew her past. Guess who? Emeka. He had been a regular customer at the club during those years. He knew Nmasi very well. In fact, they had a history. He had paid to sleep with her several times. But when he noticed Akin staring at her that night, something inside him stirred, and he pretended not to know her. At first, he planned to tell Akin later. He thought Akin just wanted to have fun and dispose her. But as days turned into weeks, and the relationship between Akin and Nmasi grew stronger, Emeka hesitated. A terrible idea began to form in his head. Eventually, after the proposal, he approached Nmasi privately one night as she was closing from her shop. "You and I both know each other, and you know that I know who you really are," he said calmly but dangerously. Mercy's heart dropped. Yes, but that life is over. I didn't do it because I wanted to. Emeka nodded slowly. Then, let it remain over. They both agreed to pretend they had never met. But Emeka had no intention of keeping that promise forever. Months passed. Aki loved Nmasi deeply. He spent money on her generously. Gifts, trips, shopping. Emeka watched quietly, and jealousy began to grow in his heart. Why should Aki enjoy such happiness? And why should Nmasi escape her past so easily, he thought to himself. So one evening, he called her. I need money, he said bluntly. What? She asked nervously. If you don't give me money, I will tell Aki everything. Nmasi froze. Her worst nightmare had arrived. She begged him, but Emeka was relentless. Week after week, he demanded more money, and he was not asking for small money. It rank from thousands and then into millions. Terrified of losing Aki, Nmasi took money from her business and gave it to Emeka. But that was not the end of it. The blackmail continued for months. Each payment strengthened Emeka's greed. Each lie broke Nmasi's heart. She lived in constant fear. And when her business had really gone down and she had no more money to give, she began asking Aki for money. At first, Aki didn't read much meaning into it, but soon he began to notice something strange. The money he gave Nmasi disappeared too quickly, and she was always asking for more, which was unlike her. She also seemed anxious, distracted, always worried. Is something wrong? He finally asked one night. She forced a smile. No, everything is fine. But everything was not fine. One evening, Aki went to Emeka's house unexpectedly. As he approached the compound, he noticed someone walking out. It was Nmasi. She looked startled when she saw him. Aki, what are you doing here? He asked. To the best of his knowledge, Nmasi and Emeka were never friends, and she never really seemed interested whenever he talked about Emeka. She struggled to speak. At that moment, Emeka stepped outside. Oh, guy, you came. At that point, Nmasi knew the game had casted. Everything had been destroyed. And this beautiful love that she enjoyed, this beautiful love that made her feel whole and healed, had been totally destroyed. She could see the look on Aki's face, and it broke her to pieces. One evening, Aki went to Emeka's house unexpectedly. As he approached the compound, he noticed someone walking out. It was Nmasi. She looked startled when she saw him. Aki, what are you doing here? He asked. To the best of his knowledge, Nmasi and Emeka were never friends, and she never really seemed interested whenever he talked about Emeka. She struggled to speak as tears filled her eyes and then ran down her cheeks. At that moment, Emeka stepped outside, wiping his hands on his trousers like he had just finished something casual. He leaned lazily against the doorpost, his eyes moving from Aki to Nmasi, then back to Aki again. A slow smile crept across his face. Ah, Aki, he said casually, as if nothing unusual was happening. You didn't tell me you were coming. But Akin was not listening. His eyes were fixed on Nmasi. Confusion, suspicion, something darker, slowly creeping in. Nmasi, he said again, his voice slower this time. You've not told me. What are you doing here? Nmasi's lips parted, but no words came out. Her mind raced. Her heart pounded so loudly that it felt like it would burst out of her chest. She stammered. But before she could form a lie, Emeka chuckled. That soft, wicked chuckle. The kind that sounded harmless but carried danger underneath. Why are you stressing yourself, guy? He said smoothly, stepping forward. Well, since you're already here, maybe it's time we stop hiding things. Nmasi's heart jumped to her throat. Emeka, she whispered, her voice shaking. Please. But Emeka raised a finger slightly. Relax. It's no big deal. He turned to Akin, his tone light, almost friendly. She remembered the night you first saw her. Akin frowned slightly. What about it? Emeka tilted his head, pretending to think. That night, she weren't exactly the only thing she noticed. Nmasi's stomach twisted violently. Emeka, she whispered again, but he ignored her. So, she came to me asking questions about you, your likes and dislikes. Because that night, she saw your ID card and picked your birthday. She's planning something special. You know it's around the corner. A surprise and all that. Then he paused just slightly. And maybe, he added, his eyes flicking briefly towards Nmasi. And a few other things. There was silence. A heavy silence. Akin's eyes moved slowly between them. Nmasi stood frozen, her mascara already streaking down one cheek. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Akin looked at her. Is that true? She swallowed hard. Yes. I didn't want you to know yet. I wanted it to be a surprise, but now everything is ruined. Her voice cracked at the end as more tears slipped down her cheeks. But inside what she felt was something else entirely. A deep, dangerous relief. The kind that comes when the truth almost escapes but somehow stays buried. Aki studied her for a long moment. Not just her words, but her face, her eyes, her fear. She looked so sincere. Slowly, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. Come on, he said softly. It's okay. His hand rested gently on her back. We can still plan something together. He held her tight. But over her shoulder, his eyes met Emeka's. Emeka was still smiling, looking calm and unbothered. And something about that smile did not feel right. Not at all. Later that night, as Akin drove them home in silence, the road stretched long and quiet ahead of them. Nmasi kept glancing at him, waiting for questions, waiting for suspicion, waiting for something to break. But nothing came. Akin said nothing. He did not ask, did not probe, he did not accuse. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than anger. Beside him, his fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched, then relaxed, then clenched again. Because Even though he said nothing, his mind was not quiet. He replayed Emeka's words, how he said it, that pause, that look, that tone. And for the first time, a question slipped quietly into his heart, small but sharp. And once it entered, it refused to leave. A seed has been sown. You know the worst part? Truth does not hide forever. It waits patiently for the right moment to destroy everything. And this time, the truth did not wait long. It came violent, unforgiving. It was their engagement party night, the kind of night people prayed for. The hall was filled with laughter, music, and flashing lights. Friends and family moved around happily, glasses clinking, voices rising in celebration. Nmasi looked beautiful in her dress, like a woman who had finally found peace. And Akin, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Every time she smiled, his chest warmed. Every time she laughed, something inside him settled. This was it. This was the life he had been waiting for. He found the right woman, the woman of his dreams. Later that night, as the celebration slowly came to an end, Akin leaned closer to her. Wait for me in the car, he said gently. I will clear the bills and join you. Nmasi nodded with a soft smile. I'll be waiting. Besties. She had no idea. Akin walked towards the reception desk. He paid, collected his receipt, exchanged a few final handshakes. Then he turned and began heading towards the exit. That was when he heard it. A voice, familiar, sharp, panicked. I can't keep doing this. Akin froze. His brows pulled together slightly. That voice. It was Nmasi. Another voice followed. This one was cold, calm, and dangerous. Then, I will tell him everything. Akin's heart skipped. Emeka. Emeka and Nmasi again. Obviously, the other day was not a coincidence. These two have something going on between them. Slowly and carefully, he stepped closer, stopping just behind a pillar near the side entrance, hidden as he listened. You are wicked, Emeka. You are evil. You've taken millions already from me. My business is drowning. Everything is going down. When do you intend to stop? When? Akin's fingers tightened slowly. Millions? And I keep taking money from Aki. Why are you doing this? Don't you think it's enough? Akin's heart slammed violently against his chest. Taking money from him. Emeka laughed. A short, cruel laughter. You're so pathetic, Nmasi. And an ingrate. Look, in this life, nothing goes for nothing. I have protected you long enough, haven't I? If not, all these things you're enjoying, the trips, the vacations, the gifts, the luxurious life, would have vanished. Aki felt something cold begin to spread inside him. Be ready to kiss this luxury life goodbye if you don't do as I say, Emeka continued. Aki has money. I mean plenty cool cash. All I asked for is 10 million. 10 million is nothing to him. Akin's jaw clenched. His breathing changed, slow and heavy. This is not fair. This is not fair. Can you hear yourself, Emeka? Please. Please, Emeka. Okay. Okay. What exactly will you tell him? There was silence for a second. Then Emeka spoke deliberately, like a man pulling a trigger. The truth that you were a stripper and a top-rated prostitute that has slept with half of Lagos. Akin's heart stopped. His ears rang. Everything went silent. Completely. He stepped out slowly. His face had changed. Nmasi turned first. The moment her eyes met his, her entire world shattered. Aki. Her voice was barely a whisper. Emeka turned too. For the first time that night, his confidence cracked. Just a little. A stripper? A prostitute? Aki asked quietly. His voice was calm. Too calm. The words hung in the air like death. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the night seemed to hold his breath. Emeka opened his mouth, but Aki raised his hand. Don't. Just one word. Sharp and final. He did not even look at him. Let her talk. Nmasi's knees weakened. She grabbed the car beside her to steady herself. Her body trembled violently. Aki, I. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. Just tell me this is not true, Aki said, his eyes locked onto hers. Searching, hoping, but something inside him already knew. Nmasi looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment she realized something. There was no escaping this. This was time for the truth to be revealed. The unforgiving truth about her ugly past. She took a deep breath. That night, Baba Gbenga threw us out. Her voice shook as she spoke. We slept outside in the rain. And from that day, I decided to take on the burden of my family, as we had no one. Then, my mother fell sick. Aki, my mother was dying. I had nothing. I was just a little girl of 17, and no one was willing to help. Then I met this woman who ran a clubhouse. At first, I didn't know what she did. She just promised to help me and invited me over. Prostitution was the only thing that could save my family. I didn't have a better option. If there was, then I didn't know better. My first night with a man was in that club. I lost my virginity in that clubhouse. I stood there, shaking, telling myself it was just one night. But one night became another, and another. She looked at him broken, completely broken, until I didn't recognize myself anymore. Because my family still needed the money, and all I thought about was them. There was silence, a deep, heavy silence. I left that life before I met you, she added quickly. I swear to you, Aki, before you walked into my life, I had already stopped and started my business. I was trying to start again. I was trying to be clean. For 4 years, I've been out of that life. But Emeka, he knew from the beginning he was one of my customers. He started blackmailing me. His head turned slowly towards Emeka. His eyes darkened. I paid him with everything I had. Even the money you gave me and the ones I collected. I was afraid of losing you. I didn't know how you will receive the truth. Aki stood still, very still. His chest rose slowly, then fell, then rose again. Then he turned slowly towards Emeka, the man he once called brother. You knew, Aki said quietly. His voice was low, dangerous. You knew everything. Emeka tried to recover. She lied to you first, he snapped quickly. She pretended to be innocent. The punch came fast, hard, brutal. It landed directly on Emeka's jaw. The force sent him staggering backward. How could you? Aki roared. His voice exploded into the night. I called you my brother. You sat there, watched me love her. And you were destroying her behind my back. Did I say destroying her? You were destroying me behind my back. Emeka wiped blood from his lip, then scoffed. Love, he laughed bitter. Open your eyes, Aki. Your fiancé is a sex worker. He pointed at Nmasi. I was helping you. If not for this, you wouldn't have found out. Aki turned slowly. You are a fool. A wicked fool. You were helping me by blackmailing her? Can you even hear yourself? He turned back to her. She stood there crying. Aki closed his eyes. Just for a second. Then silence stretched. Painful. Endless. Then without a word, he turned, walked to his car, opened the door, paused. For a moment, it looked like he wanted to say something, like there was a war inside him. But in the end, he said nothing and drove away. Aki! She screamed his name. Her voice tore through the night. But the car did not stop. The sound of his tires faded slowly until there was nothing left. And in that moment, something inside her collapsed completely. She knew everything was over. The next morning, Nmasi sat quietly in her room, with tears in her eyes. It felt as though even her tears had grown tired, resting there without falling. How had she even expected to live a happy life after all the terrible things she had done? The question echoed painfully in her mind, again and again, with no answer. Aki had not called. He had not texted, and out of fear, she did not try to reach him, because deep down, she already knew the truth. She was too afraid to say out loud. She had lost him forever. The house felt different now, too quiet, too empty, too honest. For days, she moved through her house like a ghost. She stopped answering calls, stopped going out. She stopped existing properly. The laughter that once filled her life had disappeared completely, as though it had never been there in the first place. Even the luxury around her now felt meaningless. The flowers he once sent began to dry slowly on the table, petal by petal, just like her hope. The dresses he bought remained untouched, hanging quietly in the wardrobe, like memories she was no longer allowed to wear. And every night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, not sleeping, just remembering. Remembering his voice, remembering the way he used to look at her, remembering the love she had almost destroyed. And now, all of it was gone because of her. Meanwhile, Akin was fighting his own storm. The truth had broken something in him, but the silence that followed broke something even deeper. Everywhere he went, he saw her. In the empty passenger seat of his car, where she used to sit talking, laughing, teasing him. In the restaurant they once visited, where her laughter used to rise above the noise. In the quiet beaches, where she had laughed while running from the waves like a child, free and unafraid. He tried to distract himself with work, meetings, business calls, endless trips, but nothing worked. Because you can run from a person, but you cannot run from how they made you feel. Her voice followed him everywhere, soft and persistent. Her smile, her kindness, her gentleness. And slowly something began to rise in his heart. A memory. That night, she had confessed. She did not deny it. She did not lie again. She didn't even try to defend herself. She told him everything, every ugly part, every painful truth. And he saw the sincerity in her. He saw the pain, he saw the regret. And he knew she was just terrified of losing the only good thing that had come into her life. That memory refused to leave him. Weeks passed, and one night, Akin sat alone on the balcony of his house. The city lights glittered far below, beautiful, distant, and meaningless. He held a glass of wine in his hand, but had not touched it. His mind was not there. He was still wrestling with himself. The words stripper, prostitute refused to leave his head. His jaw tightened. His grip on the glass hardened. Then Nmasi's voice followed. I left that life before I met you. I was trying to start a clean life. I was afraid of losing you. Akin leaned back slowly. His chest rose, then fell. She was just 17. She was just a girl who sacrificed her joy, herself, to save her family. He would have done worse if he were in her shoe. It wasn't like he had led a perfect life himself. Suddenly, something in him shifted. The woman he loved was not the one Emeka described. The woman he loved was the one who laughed freely on the beach, the one who checked if he had eaten after long meetings, the one who stayed awake to talk to him until midnight, the one who had slowly become the calmest part of his life. And the thought of never seeing her again did not just hurt. It felt like something had been taken from him, something important. He sat up abruptly. No, he said quietly to himself. Then again, stronger. I can't do this. He stood up immediately, grabbed his car keys. Because some decisions do not need time, they need courage. And within minutes, he was already driving. At that same moment, Mercy sat quietly in her living room. The house was dark except for one small lamp, its soft glow barely touching the corners of the room. She had stopped crying days ago. Now, there was only silence, heavy, unbroken silence. She believed this was over, that she had lost the only man who had ever truly loved her. She just needed to pick up the pieces of her life. Then, suddenly, headlights appeared outside her window. A car stopped in front of the house. Her heart skipped. She did not move at first. It was as though her body had forgotten how to react to hope. But then the doorbell rang once, twice. Her hands trembled as she stood up and walked towards the door. Each step felt slow, careful, like she was walking towards something that could either heal her or break her completely. Slowly, she opened it, and there he was. Akin stood there, breathing slightly hard, looking at her like a man who had traveled through fire just to reach that moment. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. No words, no movement, just two hearts standing on the edge of everything they had almost lost. Then, Mercy whispered softly, "Akin." Before she could say another word, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms tightly, desperately, like a man who was afraid that if he let go, she would disappear again. "I tried to stay away," he said against her hair, "but I can't." His voice was thick, heavy with everything he had been holding back. "I thought about everything. Your past, the lies, the fear. But I also thought about the woman you are today." His hand lifted gently, wiping the tear that had begun to fall from her eye. "You're not that girl anymore. You left that life before I found you. And if I walk away now, then I lose the best thing that has ever happened to me." Mercy shook her head weakly, tears already gathering again. "You deserve better, Akin." "No," he said firmly. "I deserve you." He pulled back slightly and cupped her face, his hand steady. "I am not marrying your past. I am marrying the woman who fought for her family, who rebuilt from nothing, who loved me so hard that she tried to protect me from pain, even if it meant carrying it alone." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently. "And if loving you means carrying someone's shadows too, then let them come. We will face them together." Her tears fell freely now, no restraint, no holding back. "I will stand by you," he continued softly, "through every whisper, through every judgment, through every shadow from your past. Because I love you." That was when Mercy finally broke. She wrapped her arms around him tightly, crying into his chest, like someone who had been holding her breath for too long and could finally breathe again. And this time, he held her even tighter, as though he had finally found the place where his heart truly belonged. Days passed. Akin was not a man who allowed evil to simply walk away. In the days that followed his reconciliation with Nmasi, he began quietly piecing things together, step by step, like a man determined to bring hidden darkness into light. At first, Nmasi was afraid when he asked her questions about Emeka. "Please, just let it go," she whispered. I just want to forget everything. But Akin gently held her hands, his grip firm yet reassuring. Mercy, he said softly. Silence is the reason men like Emeka keep hurting people. What he did to you is a crime. Slowly, carefully, she began telling him everything again. The calls, the threats, the messages, the endless demands for money. Each word felt like reopening a wound she had tried desperately to close. But this time she was not alone. Together they gathered all the evidence, the bank transfers, voice recordings, screenshots of threats. Piece by piece, the truth began to take shape. And the more Aki uncovered, the darker it became. Emeka had not only extorted money from Nmasi, he had done it repeatedly without mercy, because he believed she would remain silent forever, that fear would keep her trapped, that shame would keep her hidden. But he was wrong, very wrong. One quiet afternoon, just as Emeka sat comfortably in the bar with a few friends, laughing loudly, boasting about life, completely unaware that his world was about to change, two police officers walked in. Emeka Okafor, one officer called. The room went silent. The laughter faded. Emeka frowned slightly, irritation flickering across his face. Yes, that's me. The officer stepped forward. You are under arrest for blackmail, extortion, and criminal intimidation. The words dropped like a bomb. The laughter around the table died immediately. Emeka blinked in confusion. What nonsense are you talking about? He snapped, trying to mask the sudden crack in his confidence. But the officer had already reached for his wrist. Everything you say from now will be used as evidence in court. Cold metal clicked shut. Shock washed across Emeka's face. Real shock. Wait. This must be a mistake. I am not a criminal. But it was not. There was no mistake at all. As I led him towards the door, his eyes darted around desperately, searching, hoping and trying to understand how everything had slipped out of his control. That was when he saw them. Two familiar figures standing outside the bar. Aki and Nmasi. For a moment, Emeka froze. The arrogant confidence I had once filled his face drained away instantly. You reported me, he stammered, his voice now small and uncertain. Nmasi looked at him quietly. The fear he used to trap her was gone, completely gone. He thought fear and shame would keep me silent forever, she said calmly. But you were wrong. You will rot in that jail until you've paid back every single dime you ever took from me. The officers pushed him forward. This time he did not resist. As the car door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoed like the final closing of a chapter. And in that moment, the weight of his actions finally settled upon him. For the first time in a very long time, Emeka had nothing left to say. And for the first time in months, Nmasi felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Freedom. 3 months later, in a beautiful church surrounded by family and true friends, Aki and Nmasi got married. The atmosphere was filled with joy. Soft music played gently in the background as guests smiled, whispered, and watched the moment unfold like something out of a dream. And then the doors opened. Nmasi stepped in, looking radiant and whole. Pabolu walked her down the aisle. Each step she took felt like a journey through everything she had survived. Pain, sacrifice, shame, and finally redemption. Her eyes searched the front of the church, and there he was, standing tall, waiting for her. Akin. He was looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. As they exchanged vows, Nmasi's eyes filled with grateful tears. Not tears of pain, but tears of healing, of a heart that had been broken and carefully put back together. Agnes cried as she watched her daughter draped in that white beautiful dress, exchanging her vows. Her chest swelled with emotion. Even though she did not know the full depth of what Nmasi had been through, she knew one thing for sure. Her daughter was strong, stronger than life itself, and she owed her life to her. As for Nmasi, she had been once trapped in shame, buried in a life she never chose, a life that almost swallowed her whole. But love had given her redemption. But that is not where this story ends. Akin had come from a powerful family of lawyers, and with his help, Nmasi and her family recovered everything that had been taken from them by her wicked uncles. Justice, at last, found its way back to them. Uncle Dike had a heart attack in the courtroom. Immediately the judge pronounced his sentence. His face went pale, and before anyone could react, he collapsed. He died before he was rushed to the hospital. His wife and children were driven out of Nmasi's father's house and company in shame. Their bank accounts were seized, and all the money in it were given back to Nmasi and her family, the same way they had once stripped another family of everything. Life returned the favor, and after the rain came the sunshine. Agnes lived happily for the rest of her life with her children, finally free from suffering. And the best part, Nmasi was the happiest woman alive. Not because her life had been perfect, but because she had survived what was meant to destroy her and still found love, peace, and herself again. And Aki made sure of that. Hey besties, finally, we've come to the end of this amazing story, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it. I would love you to share your thoughts in the comment section. And if you enjoy our stories while you're here to subscribe to this channel, please do not skip this video without hitting on the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories. Thank you so much for all your love and support. That means so much to me. Right now, I'll have to go, and see you in our next story. Bye.
Gather round the fire, children, and all. Come hear a tale that's yet to be told. Epic tales by Mara's voice, of tricksters, queens, and lovers' joy, where trees can talk and spirits roll.